Hello, welcome to Admission Application Basics, how to write an effective essay. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is steps in writing great application essays. The first thing we're going to talk about is making sure that you read the instructions several times. Those instructions are there for a reason. So if in the instructions it says for you to do level 1 APA headings or cite your sources, then you should know that when you are citing your sources as a social worker, you should be using APA and citing the article that you obtain it from. The second step in writing a great application is to make sure that you reflect and you brainstorm on each question before sitting down and writing it. You need to spend a good amount of time thinking about each question and taking time to reflect on who you are and what your personal brand is and what qualities you bring to a cohort of graduate students. The next thing that you need to do is, if possible, connect your academics into your personal statement. So for example, if you know that social workers are people who are very excited and like to talk about social justice issues or diversity issues, you should use academic language that you have learned in your undergraduate education to explain and to describe your thoughts on this. The next thing you need to remember is that you need to be your authentic self, but not too authentic. So what I mean by that is that we can smell a phony. We know when you're using vocabulary outside of your comfort zone, when you're exaggerating. We also know when you've given too much personal detail about yourself. So for example, if you met someone on the side of the street, would you tell your innermost thoughts and secrets to them? Probably not. So I recommend when you're writing an essay that you be mindful that the person who is reading the essay has never met you before. So you would not want to be too authentic and disclose too much in that essay to them. The next thing I want to let you know is it's important to have it reviewed by others several times. Get feedback from several sources that know you and see things like, is this okay? But also things like, does this reflect me? Does this sound like me? Question 6 in steps in writing great application essays is to use specific examples that relate to the question being asked. So for example, if it asks a question about social justice, you might want to give a specific example about a time where you witnessed a social justice issue and how that made you feel. So use specific examples. Step 7 in writing great applications is to talk about the elephant in the room. And what I mean by that is there's a couple of things that might be an elephant in the room when you're looking at an application. The first thing might be your GPA. Maybe the GPA requirement for your school is a 3.0 and you are at the 3.00 line literally. Talk about that. Maybe your first year, it took you a long time to decide what type of undergraduate degree you wanted to get, and so you struggled in general education. The other elephant in the room that sometimes students don't address is if they have something in their background. So for example, a felony conviction. It's important to talk about that and to nod to the fact that you know that it could be a barrier for you finding the placement and field that you want, that you understand that and are willing to accept that risk. So those are the two big ones. A third one might be maybe you're coming directly from undergraduate education and you don't have any social work experience. So what are you going to do to make sure that you're able to integrate the knowledge that you should have from the field experience into the classroom for graduate education? So those might be what we consider elephant in the room conversations that you know might hinder you or put you behind another application, and it might be helpful for you to discuss those things. The 8th thing is making sure that you're very clear and concise when you explain things. You want to make sure that you, if it tells you that you're only should use about 500 words, you only use 500 words, not 501 words. It's better to write short, concise sentences than long and, in your mind, intelligent sentences. So short and concise is better. And the other thing I want to say about that is, if you're applying to our graduate program, 500 to 1,000 words per essay question is appropriate. Others, because ours doesn't give a limit, but there are some graduate programs or undergraduate programs that will give a limit, so make sure that you look at that. And then edit some more, and no, really, after that, edit more. If the first time that you write it you think is your best time, I would challenge you to say write it again. Because in any writing, for anybody who's ever done any writing, there are times when I write the same 2 sentences 50 times. So I would just challenge you to make sure that you continue to look at it, you continually to try to make it as clear and as concise as possible to make sure that your application reads well. So you're probably wanting to know what makes reviewers grumpy. So the first thing that makes reviewers grumpy is quirkiness. So what I mean by that is, don't try to come up with some quirky idea to make you stand out. Your application, you don't need to be weird because you're not weird, and if it's okay if you are weird, but again, just be your authentic you. The second thing I want to make sure you understand is that we read your resume. Most graduate applications or undergraduate applications require you to have a resume attached. So please don't repeat your resume when you're writing your essay questions, because we read your resume. The third thing that makes people grumpy is confessional writing. And that is revealing something that resides deep in your heart that only you have known up to this point. That also could be selling yourself short, pointing out all your weaknesses or none of your strengths. That can make writers grumpy as well. Also, make sure that you avoid cliches such as, I've wanted to be in this program all my life because I have a passion for helping people, or ever since I was a child I dreamed of being a social worker. So those are what we call cliche sentences that probably everybody would write or think about. Everybody wants to help people, everybody has passion, so avoid doing that. This might go without saying, but you'd be surprised how many people in their writing do this. Make sure that you don't use slang terms or profanity in your writing. So just don't. Spelling or grammatical errors. For those of you who are applying to our undergraduate program, you do that on a Microsoft Word document, so it should automatically show you your spelling errors. But those of you who are applying for graduate education, you won't have that luxury. You have to complete your essays in social work CAS. And so my recommendation for you will be to make sure that you you actually write out your essay questions in Microsoft Word, have Microsoft Word check that, and then you can cut and paste that into social work CAS. The next thing I want to make sure that you don't do is repeat yourself several times. So even though the essay questions oftentimes are different, a lot of times I see students write the same things and have themes throughout the essay questions. And so we want to see the most broad spectrum version of you possible. So if you're passionate about, let's say, classism as a social justice issue, it's great to write about that in one of your essay questions. But if there's another essay question where you can nod to a social justice issue, try to think about another social justice issue. Or let's say one of your characteristics is that you're always on time. It's great to write about that in one essay question, but don't use that same characteristic in all of the essay questions that you use or that you write about. The next thing is lethargy. Use words that are energetic. You're positive, you're enthusiastic. Use those descriptive terms to portray you. It's important for us to see that you're super excited about applying to our program and that you have a great attitude as you're starting out, knowing that you think you're going to be successful as you're applying to graduate education. The last thing I want you to be mindful of is avoiding negativity. So, for example, you might have had a really bad experience in past educational experiences with a teacher or maybe with a university. But I would caution you to not talk about those things in your essay to us. And the reason for that is we might make the assumption that, they had a bad experience here, so maybe they're going to have a bad experience with us as well. Maybe they're just a negative person. So make sure that you're really mindful of how you answer questions for us to not perceive you as someone who's going to come in with the glass half empty instead of the glass half full. So what makes reviewers happy? So the first thing that makes reviewers happy is for you to focus on you and no one else. Make sure that the main emphasis on your essay questions is about you. Even if you've had a really influential mentor or you have lots of passion about a certain population, it's okay to talk about those things, but it's really not about those things that we're concerned about. It's about knowing who you are and whether or not you'd be a good fit for our program. So make sure you spend more time talking about yourself. The next thing that I want to tell you is show us, don't tell us. So for example, if you are a person that you feel like you're a good communicator, or you're a person that uses humor in stressful situations, don't just say you're a humorous person. Provide us with an example of how you use that in a stressful situation. The third thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is be knowledgeable about the program that you're applying for. So for example, if you're applying to our Advanced Generalist program, I want to see that you know what it means to be Advanced Generalist practitioner. I want to see that you know what it means to apply and understand graduate education. I want to see that you know what it means to be a student who's going to take their classes online. So nod to the type of program that you're applying to in your application. The next thing I want to see in your application is that you clearly understand and look forward to the challenges of the program and the social work field, not just the benefits. So something good here would be to talk about how you understand that graduate education is going to be difficult. It's going to be harder than undergraduate education, and the steps that you put in place to make sure that you're ready to meet the challenge of graduate education. And the last thing that makes reviewers happy is to follow the rules. If it says less than 500 words, write less than 500 words. Do not write 501 words. If it says cite your source using APA, which is what we use in social work education. So here are a couple of grammar tips to remember when you're writing your essay. The first is what I talked about on a previous slide, which is using Microsoft Word, but I'm going to go into more detail and tell you that there is actually a proofing option. You can Google how to find that proofing option if it doesn't automatically come up, which for most you actually have to set your options to show the proofing option. And with this proofing option, it will show you grammar and spelling. And so I highly recommend that you make sure your proofing option is on for Microsoft Word and that you're utilizing Microsoft Word to write your essays and then transferring them to social work CAS if you have to, and if you're applying to a school that has social work CAS. The next thing I want to remind you of is that spell check is not foolproof. So for example, there is a difference between there and there, T-H-E-I-R and T-H-E-R-E. So you need to make sure that you have asked someone, don't just rely on your spell check in Microsoft Word, ask someone to review your documents. The next thing I want to talk to you about is making sure that you write in active voice, which means the subject of the sentence performs the action. So an active voice sentence would be the dog, which is the subject, bit the man. The passive voice would be the man was bitten by the dog. Now you might, if you're not all that great with understanding the difference between passive and active, think, how in the world am I going to know this when I'm writing? Well, don't worry, because if you set up your proofing option in Microsoft Word, it will show you every sentence that is in the passive voice. And so you will make sure you change that sentence before you submit your application. Again, the whole concise writing is key and clear to communication. A sentence should contain no unnecessary fluff words, and a paragraph should contain no unnecessary sentences. It's really, really important. I say shorter sentence. If you're going to have to err always on sentences that are too short, not sentences that are too long. Also make sure that you understand, we often have writers that misuse apostrophes, and the basic rule is quite simple. Use the apostrophe to indicate possession, not a plural. And so make sure that, again, if you are a person that sometimes struggles with that rule, that you have someone specifically look at your apostrophes and make sure that you did them right. The second to final thing I want to tell you is that the APA manual, for those of you who are in undergraduate education right now and who are using the APA manual, I highly recommend that you read pages 77 to 124 that discuss how to write clearly and concisely, because it discusses all these grammar tips that I just gave you and many, many, many more. So that is going to be something that you should utilize now, and if you get accepted into graduate education or undergraduate education throughout your time. The final thing is, if you're a student on the Missouri State campus, or maybe you're not, maybe you're a student somewhere else currently, every school that I'm aware of has a writing center, and you need to make the writing center your new best friend before you apply to our program. Have them review it. If that's possible. And I know that's not always possible for all of you, but for those of you who it is possible for, make sure that you utilize that. So I hope these tips and tricks helped you, and I hope you have a great day.